My mother handed my wedding dress to my sister and said, "It suits her better anyway." She said it 3 days before my ceremony. I thought that was the cruelest thing she could do to me. I was wrong. My name is Elise. I'm 30 now. My sister Jenna is 28. Growing up, Jenna was what my mother called easy to love. I was the one she called difficult. That word followed me through my whole childhood. Difficult if I cried. Difficult if I asked questions. Difficult if I noticed things. Jenna was sunshine. I was weather. If Jenna forgot to clean her room, my mother said she was creative. If I left one book on the table, my mother said I had no respect. If Jenna broke something, it was an accident. If I broke something, it proved a point about my character. My father was quieter, but that did not make him safer. He hated scenes, he hated discomfort, he hated anything that forced him to choose. That mattered later. When I was 10, Jenna took the $50 our aunt mailed me for my birthday and bought makeup from the mall. I found the torn envelope in the kitchen trash. My mother told me siblings share. When I was 12, Jenna lost the bracelet Nana gave me and cried so hard my mother grounded me for upsetting her. When I was 15, Jenna flirted with a boy I liked at a church picnic, then told everyone I was jealous and unstable. People laughed. I laughed too. That was the thing. You learn to laugh early in families like mine. You laugh before your own pain can stand up. By high school, I had one rule. Do not react in public. If I cried, Jenna looked innocent. If I got angry, my mother looked tired and told people I was sensitive. If I stayed quiet, everyone praised my maturity. What they meant was convenience. The only person who saw it clearly was my grandfather's sister, Aunt Rose. She was not technically my grandmother, but she was the closest thing I had. She lived alone in a white farmhouse 15 minutes outside town and smelled like coffee, lavender, and old wood smoke. When I was little, I spent Saturdays there helping her can peaches and sort letters in a tin box by the window. She watched people carefully. One afternoon when I was 16, Jenna had just screamed because my mother would not let her borrow the car. 20 minutes later, my mother handed her the keys anyway. I was on Aunt Rose's porch shelling peas too hard. She glanced at my hands and said, "You're opening those peas like they insulted you." I laughed, then I cried. I told her I hated the person I became around my own family. She set down her bowl and said, "No, honey, you hate the role they keep handing you." I never forgot that. The role they keep handing you, that was exactly it. In my family, I was always handed a role. Calm one, responsible one, forgiving one, flexible one. The person who gave up her seat, her time, her plans, her feelings, and then smiled so everybody else could stay comfortable. Aunt Rose saw me. My mother hated that she did. If Rose praised my grades, my mother said Jenna was more social. If Rose praised my work ethic, my mother said Jenna had people skills. Praise in my family worked like a tax. If I got any, somebody had to take it back. College saved me for a while. I got a scholarship 2 states away and left the week after graduation. It was the first place where nobody knew my assigned role. I studied marketing. I worked nights at a diner. I learned how to sleep in short pieces and carry my whole life in a backpack if needed. I loved it. For the first time, nobody entered my room without knocking. Nobody told my stories for me. Nobody asked me to shrink so someone else could shine. That was also where I met Miles. He was not flashy. He was not loud. He had tired eyes, kind hands, and a habit of listening all the way to the end of my sentences. The first time we studied together, I talked for 10 straight minutes about a class project that was driving me insane. When I finished, he smiled and said, "You always think in 3 directions at once, don't you?" No one had ever noticed me kindly before. We dated for 4 years. Not perfect years, real ones, cheap dinners, secondhand furniture. Late rent once, long drives home for holidays, arguments about dishes and work stress and where we might settle after graduation. But real love has room for dishes and stress. That is how I know it is real. I made one mistake. I brought him home too often. The first Thanksgiving he spent with my family. Jenna smiled too hard. She asked him endless questions. Where did he grow up? What did his parents do? Was he always this quiet? Did he have a thing for complicated girls? Everyone laughed. Even Miles smiled politely. Under the table, my hands shook. I knew that tone. Jenna was not curious. She was circling after that. Little things started happening. Miles would mention stories from my childhood I had not told him. Embarrassing stories. Private ones, the time I threw up before a piano recital. The time my mother made me wear Jenna's old prom dress to a church banquet and everybody stared because it did not fit right. When I asked where he heard that stuff, he said Jenna told him. I asked her to stop. She laughed and said, "Relax. I was helping him understand you." Helping him understand you. That phrase sat in my chest like a stone. Then Miles started canceling plans to help Jenna with random emergencies. A ride home from a party, car trouble, a bad breakup, a furniture pickup. Always something. I told myself I was being paranoid. That word had been trained into me. Paranoid, dramatic, difficult. It kept me from naming what was obvious. Then, one spring, Miles sat me down on the hood of his car outside my apartment and said he needed space. My stomach dropped before the rest of the sentence even arrived. Space is never just space. He said he felt lost. He said he needed to figure out who he was. He said we had become too intense. All soft words. All clean words. Words designed to make desertion sound thoughtful. I cried on the curb after he left. Not graceful crying, the kind where your chest hurts and you keep wiping your face with your sleeve because you forgot tissues existed. 3 weeks later, my cousin sent me a screenshot. Miles and Jenna were at a brewery together. 2 weeks after that, my mother called and said, before you hear it from the wrong person, Jenna and Miles have really connected. That was the word she chose. Not betrayed, not crossed a line. Connected. I could barely breathe. I asked how long. She sighed like I was exhausting. Then she said, sometimes life is messy. At least mature people accept that. That sentence changed something in me, not all at once, but a crack formed. Mature people accept that. Meaning what? Mature people swallow public humiliation? Mature people smile while their sister dates their ex with family approval? Mature people keep peace by cutting out their own tongue? I stopped coming home after that. For almost a year, I only called Aunt Rose. I worked. I moved apartments. I cried less. I told myself I was healing. Then Aunt Rose got sick. Colon cancer. Caught late. She did not say that right away. She told me she was tired. Then she was more tired. Then there were tests, then surgery, then the look on the doctor's face. I moved back for 6 months to help. Those 6 months turned into almost 2 years. I do not regret one day of it. Rose's white farmhouse became the safest place I had ever lived. I handled appointments, meds, bills, groceries, laundry, and the million tiny things illness creates. I worked remotely from her dining room table and learned how to smile through fear. My mother came by when other people were there. Jenna came by twice the first month. Once to complain about the smell of soup in the house, and once to ask whether Rose planned to update her will, just so things stayed clear. Rose laughed in her face. Later that night, she looked at me and said, your sister walks into every room like she's already spending it. I laughed so hard I cried. At that point, I thought the biggest fight ahead would be emotional. I was wrong. One cold Tuesday afternoon, Rose asked me to bring the brown file box from the study closet. I thought she wanted insurance papers. She wanted something else. Inside the box were deeds, trust papers, account summaries, and old handwritten notes. Her lawyer came the next day. A sharp woman named Diane with silver hair and the kind of voice people stop lying around. That was when I learned the truth. Rose was leaving the farmhouse to me. She was also leaving me the downtown storefront she and her late husband had rented out for years. A narrow brick building on Main Street that used to be a fabric shop. I had known she owned it. I had not known it was fully paid off and worth far more than anybody guessed. I stared at the papers until the words blurred. Then I asked the only thing that mattered. Why me? Rose looked annoyed. Because you show up, she said. That sentence hit me so hard I had to look down. Because you show up. No one in my family had ever rewarded that before. They had only used it. I told Diane I did not want anyone saying I influenced Rose. Diane said, good thing the law does not depend on your relatives being reasonable. I wish that had been the end of it. It wasn't. A month later, my mother found out there were changes. Not from me. From Jenna. And Jenna found out because she had gone through the desk in Rose's study while pretending to look for a charger. She was never looking for what she claimed. That Sunday, my mother arrived at the farmhouse with Jenna and Miles. Yes, Miles was still around. Not in a dramatic way, in a boring, disappointing one. That almost made it worse. My mother brought a pie she did not bake. Jenna wore white boots in wet grass and complained about the driveway. Miles carried flowers and looked uncomfortable enough that for 1 weak second I almost pitied him. Then I remembered the brewery picture. The kitchen felt wrong the second they sat down. Too bright, too polite, the kind of polite that hides knives. At first, my mother made small talk. Then she put down her fork and said, we hear there may be updates to the estate. Rose did not blink. We, she asked. Jenna smiled and said, Mom just means the family. Rose took a sip of tea. The family did not earn my house, she said. I did. The room changed right then. My mother's smile tightened. She said she only wanted fairness. Fairness, that was rich. Fairness had never interested her when Jenna took my money, my stories, my boyfriend, or my peace. Then Jenna started listing reasons she would be better suited for the storefront. She understood style. She had stronger local ties. She had a vision for branding. I just sat there stunned by the nerve of hearing my whole life reduced again in front of me. Rose let her talk, then she turned to Miles and asked, and what do you think? He froze. Then he said, I think families should share opportunities. Share opportunities. The man who had helped Jenna destroy my trust was now speaking like a consultant at my funeral. My hands shook under the table. I started to speak, but Rose beat me to it. No, she said. Just that, no, Jenna laughed like she thought it was a joke. Rose did not laugh back then. She said, Elise has invested time, labor, and love. Jenna has invested curiosity and entitlement. Those are not equal. No one spoke after that. My mother left early, taking the pie with her. On the drive out, she accidentally left me a voicemail. I heard her say to my father, she always sits there calm and makes everybody else look cruel. That line stayed with me. I had spent years trying not to be difficult, and somehow even my silence accused her. After that dinner, everything turned colder. My mother stopped asking how Rose was feeling. She asked whether Diane had visited again. Jenna started posting soft, fake things online. Old childhood photos, captions about sisterhood, heart emojis, people commented with warmth. I wanted to throw my phone into a lake. Then she started dropping by the farmhouse more often, always with flowers she did not pay for, always too loud, always performing concern. One afternoon I walked in from the garden and heard Jenna telling Rose, "I just worry Elise takes on too much. She gets controlling when she's stressed." I stopped in the doorway. Jenna turned and smiled like she had not just cut me open. Rose did not miss a beat. She said, "If Elise controls anything here, it is because someone else keeps trying to steal the wheel." I almost laughed. Jenna did not stay long. A month later, Rose took a bad turn. Hospital, oxygen, night nurses, new pills, more fear. I slept in a vinyl chair beside her bed, more nights than I slept in a real bed that winter. My mother came twice and complained about parking both times. Jenna came once, took a selfie in the room while Rose slept, and called the lighting tragic. I made her delete it. She rolled her eyes and said I was impossible. That winter, Rose got serious about paperwork. Diane came twice more. The second time, she asked me to take notes. That was when I learned the full truth. Not only was I getting the house and storefront, Rose had also assigned most of her liquid savings to me with smaller specific gifts to others, not because she was cruel. Because, as she put it, "I know who will keep things standing." I tried to tell her she did not have to explain herself. She gave me a look. "Elise, stop apologizing for being chosen by someone who actually knows you." I wrote that line down later so I would not forget it. Stop apologizing for being chosen. Rose died in March. There's no elegant way to write that. One day she was there. The next day the house sounded wrong, too quiet. I remember the refrigerator hum, the spoon in the sink, her reading glasses folded beside a half-finished crossword. I remember standing in her bedroom holding one of her sweaters to my face because I could not stop shaking. Grief came like static. Everything looked normal and felt ruined. The funeral was small. I wanted it that way. No giant arrangements, no dramatic music, just the people who had actually loved her. Then came the reading of the will. That was where the real war began. It happened in Diane's office 2 days later. My mother wore navy and false sadness. Jenna looked bored until numbers were mentioned. Then she sat up. Miles came too, which shocked me until I realized he thought he belonged in all of this somehow. Diane read slowly. Specific gifts first, then the farmhouse, then the storefront, then the accounts. My name came up again, and again. By the third time, Jenna's expression changed. By the fourth, my mother had gone flat. By the fifth, Miles would not look at me. When Diane finished, there was silence for a full 5 seconds. Then Jenna laughed once and said, "That cannot be right." Diane folded her hands and said, "It is right." My mother leaned forward. "There must be confusion," she said. Elise was living there while Rose was vulnerable. Vulnerable, like I had tricked a woman who once balanced 3 rentals, ran 2 businesses, and scared contractors with 1 raised eyebrow. My hands shook under the table. Diane's expression went hard. "Rose made these decisions over time," she said. "There is no question of capacity." Then Jenna said the thing I should have expected. "So, the reward for playing nurse is getting everything." I turned to her so fast my chair scraped. I said very quietly, "You took selfies in her hospital room." For once, Jenna had no answer. My mother did. She said, "This is exactly what I was afraid of. Elise always turns things ugly." That sentence again, different day, same machine. I stood up because if I stayed seated, I was going to scream. Diane asked if we needed a break. We did not take one. My mother started asking legal questions. Could the estate be reviewed? Could distribution be delayed? Could the storefront be sold first? Diane answered calmly. Every answer was some version of no. By the time we left, my mother was no longer crying. She was furious. In the parking lot, Jenna stepped close and hissed, "Enjoy it while it lasts." I should have paid more attention to that sentence, because 3 days later, somebody got into the farmhouse. Nothing huge was taken. A small cash box, some folders, Rose's old account notebook. At first, I thought it might be random. Then I noticed which drawers were open, the ones with copies of the estate papers. My whole body went cold. The police came. They asked who had keys. I said me, my mother, Jenna, the cleaning lady. That was all they asked. If I suspected anyone. I froze. I wanted to say yes. Saying it out loud felt like crossing some final line, so I said, "I don't know." That was true in the weakest possible way. Later that night, I sat on the kitchen floor with papers spread around me and a flashlight in my hand because the overhead bulb had burnt out and I had not changed it yet. That was when Daniel found me. I should explain him now. Daniel was the contractor Diane had recommended months earlier to inspect the storefront roof because it needed work. He had become, slowly and unexpectedly, part of my life. First through practical things, then through coffee, then through longer talks, then through the kind of quiet presence that does not ask to be named too early. He crouched beside me on the kitchen floor and asked what was missing. I said, not enough to matter legally, just enough to tell me this wasn't random. He was quiet for a second. Then he said, install cameras. I did the next day. 2 outside the farmhouse. 1 in the hall by the study. 1 aimed at the back porch. 3 days later, my mother called and said she wanted to come by and talk like adults. I almost laughed. Adults, as if she had not just accused me of manipulating a dying woman. I said no. She came anyway. I saw her car through the front window, then Jenna's, then Miles's. My stomach dropped. I did not let them in right away. I turned on the camera feed from my phone first. Then I opened the door but kept the chain on. My mother looked offended. Jenna looked amused. Miles looked like a man who knew he should be elsewhere but lacked character. My mother started with family language, grief, confusion, misunderstandings. Then she shifted. She said the fair thing, the kind thing, would be to split everything evenly. I told her Rose had already decided what was fair. That was when Jenna lost her smile. She said, "You think because you played Saint for 2 years, you get to own all of us now? Own us. As if I had ever owned a single minute of peace in that family." I said, "No one is asking to own you. I'm asking you to leave me alone." My mother tried a softer tone. "Sweetheart, you know Jenna needs more support." There it was. Always back to Jenna, I asked. Support for what? No answer, so I did something I had never done cleanly before. I said no, just that. No, no long speech, no apology, no effort to soften it for them. The look on my mother's face was almost childlike, like she had touched fire and could not believe it burned. Jenna's expression went flat. Then she said something I will never forget. "You always acted like the victim, but you're just greedy." I almost laughed. Greedy, from the woman who stole my boyfriend, my stories, my role, and now wanted my inheritance too. I said leave. They did not. My mother put her hand on the door and said, "You're making a huge mistake." I said, louder, "Leave." Daniel had been upstairs checking old measurements in the study for a storage cabinet I planned to build later. He came down, then stepped behind me and said, "You heard her." That changed the room. My mother hates witnesses. She pulled Jenna back and said they would go. As they walked to the cars, Jenna turned and shouted, "He won't stay when he sees who you really are." That should have sounded ridiculous. Instead, it landed on old bruises after they left. Daniel closed the door, slid the chain back, and looked at me. "I'm staying," he said. Then, softer, "If you want me to." I nodded because I could not speak. He stayed. A week later, somebody posted a long anonymous message in a local Facebook group. It said I had manipulated an elderly relative, isolated her from family, and pushed a last-minute property scam. The wording was careful, so careful it almost sounded legal. That scared me more than open anger would have. People commented things like, "If this is true, that's disgusting. Money changes people, poor mother." My hands shook while I scrolled. Then Diane called and said, "Do not answer publicly yet." She came over with printed screenshots and a legal pad. She read the post twice. Then she pointed to one sentence. "Only a family member would know that detail," she said. The detail was about a hallway argument in the hospital where my mother complained about parking in vending machines. No one else had been there. I screenshotted everything. Then I called the detective handling the break-in. That was the first time I realized this might become more than family cruelty. This might become strategy. So I started documenting everything. Texts, voicemails, screenshots, dates, unexpected visits, comments. I bought a binder and wrote in it every night. At first, it felt paranoid. Then it started to feel smart, because 2 weeks later, Jenna tried something even dumber. She called Daniel from a blocked number. He only answered because he was expecting a call about roofing permits. It was Jenna. He put it on speaker the second he realized. Her voice went sugary immediately. She said she wanted to clear the air. She said she thought I was unstable from grief. She said maybe the two of them should meet for coffee because I sometimes hear what she wants to hear. My face went hot. Daniel looked at me, then said calmly, "Do not call me again." She laughed and said, "Wow, she really trained you fast." He hung up. I was shaking so hard I had to sit down. Daniel knelt in front of me and said, "She wants you to react without thinking." I knew he was right. That was Jenna's game. Push, smile, watch the other person explode. Then point at the explosion like proof. So I got quieter, not weaker, sharper. About a month after Rose died, I got the keys to the storefront. The building was empty. Dusty, narrow, tired, but full of possibility. The first time I unlocked the front door and stepped inside alone, I cried. The tile was cracked. The back office smelled like old glue and paper. The windows were clouded from years of neglect, but I could see it, light in the windows, shelves, a studio, a small office, a place that belonged to me. Daniel took one look and said, "This place has bones." My friend Kara wrinkled her nose at the dust and said, "Please tell me you're keeping the brick wall. It's ugly in the best possible way." For the first time in my life, the future felt larger than survival. So of course my family tried to ruin it. When word got around that I was planning to renovate the storefront, my mother started telling relatives I was in over my head. Jenna told people I had no real vision. This was funny because Jenna once got fired from a bridal boutique for selling a reserve dress twice. Facts never slow people like her down. Then my cousin Nate told me something useful. He said Jenna had been bragging at a bar that she was getting the building in the end anyway. I asked what that meant. He shrugged and said she did not explain. My stomach dropped. I doubled the camera storage and changed the farmhouse locks again. Good thing I did, because 3 nights later, the back camera caught somebody trying the side door. Dark hoodie, fast movements, but the walk was familiar. The slight swing of the left arm, the impatient jerk at the handle. Jenna. I watched the clip 5 times. Not suspicion. Proof. The police took a copy. Nothing dramatic happened immediately. Apparently, trying a lock without entry is not dramatic enough for the world. But it mattered to me, because from that second on, they could not make me feel crazy anymore. Around then, Daniel proposed. Not in public. Not at a restaurant. At the empty storefront on a Sunday morning while we were standing in dust arguing about paint colors. He pulled a ring box from his coat pocket, looked terrified, and said, "I know this building is part of your future. I want to be part of it too." I laughed and cried at the same time. Then I said yes. For 24 hours, I told nobody except Kara. I wanted one clean day, then my mother saw the ring at a coffee shop when we exchanged tax papers by dinner. Half the family knew. By the next morning, Jenna texted me for the first time in weeks. Wow. Guess desperation really is romantic. I stared at the message and felt almost nothing. That frightened me more than anger, because it meant something had started to die. Not hope, not love, just the need for her approval. A few days later, my mother called and said we had to fix this before the wedding. I asked what needed fixing. She said, "The family cannot go into an event this important divided." Divided as if I had built the wall alone. She wanted brunch downtown, public place. Neutral ground, I agreed, because by then I was tired of hiding. That brunch became one of the strangest hours of my life. My mother arrived first wearing pearls and sorrow. Jenna arrived 10 minutes late in sunglasses. Miles came too, which still amazed me. There are people who stand next to enough lies that they become furniture in them. My father came as well. He looked exhausted. For the first 15 minutes, my mother spoke in circles. Family, healing, misunderstandings, pressure. Then finally, she said it. She wanted Jenna to wear my spare ceremony dress as maid of honor. I just stared at her. Then she added, "The one Rose paid to alter would fit Jenna beautifully." That was when I realized something. My mother had already taken the dress from the tailor. She had already made a plan. She had already decided my wedding was another stage where Jenna should shine. I laughed once, sharp and wrong. Jenna took off her sunglasses slowly and said, "You don't have to be rude." Rude, that word again. I asked why on earth they thought this would happen. My mother said, "Because appearances matter." There it was. Not love, not repair. Appearances. She wanted pictures that lied. I said no. She said people would ask questions. I said let them. Jenna leaned forward and said quietly, "You really want everyone to know what kind of person you are?" I looked right at her and said, "More than I want them to believe what kind of person you are." For once my father spoke. He said, "Enough." All 4 of us looked at him. I waited for the rest. It never came. He did not choose truth. He chose volume control. That was my father in one word: enough. Not enough to protect me. Just enough to stop the sound. I paid my part of the bill and left. That night I made the decision. My mother, Jenna, and Miles were not invited to the wedding. I told Daniel first, then Kara. Then, the next morning, I sent my father a short email. Given the repeated harassment, attempted interference with the estate, false statements and boundary violations, Mom, Jenna, and Miles will not be included in the wedding. I hope you can attend alone if you choose. He did not reply for 2 days. Then he sent one line, "I wish things were different." I stared at it for a long time. Not, "I understand." Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "I support you." Just a wish with no owner. A week later, invitations went out. 2 days after that, all hell broke open. Jenna posted a crying selfie online with the caption, "Imagine losing your sister and your aunt in the same year. Some pain has no words." People flooded the comments with sympathy. My mother commented a heart. An aunt wrote, "Family is forever." I nearly threw my phone. Kara took it from me and said, "Do not bleed for free." That helped. Then Jenna escalated. She started messaging relatives privately saying I had become controlling and paranoid since Rose died. She implied Daniel was isolating me. She told one cousin I was threatening lawsuits over simple family concerns. That cousin sent me screenshots because she loves drama, but loves facts more. I added them to the binder. Then came the real twist. One Friday afternoon, Diane called and asked if I was sitting down. I was not. I sat. She said somebody had submitted a typed statement claiming Rose had wanted to split the estate evenly shortly before her death. My vision narrowed. What statement from whom? Diane could not tell me everything yet, but she said the document was obviously suspicious and had not been executed properly. Still, it existed, and that meant someone had crossed from manipulation into fabrication. My first thought was Jenna. My second thought was my mother helped. My third thought was that I had been stupid to think this would stop at gossip. I went cold all over. Then angry. Not hot angry, clear angry, the kind that sharpens. I asked Diane what we needed. She said full documentation, hospital timelines, witness records, and patience. Patience. I had spent my whole life being patient, but this time, patience would be a weapon, not a cage, so I used it. I dug through calendars, texts, hospital logs, receipts, and emails. Diane helped me build a timeline. Daniel set up backups and folders. We worked at my dining table until midnight, 3 nights in a row. The more we built it, the stronger it got. On the date the fake statement claimed Rose wanted changes, she had not been alone with my mother or Jenna at all. She had been in imaging for part of the afternoon and under observation the rest. There were records, there were nurses, there was no gap. Then something even dumber surfaced. One of the witness names on the typed statement belonged to a notary who had died 18 months earlier. When Diane told me that, I laughed out loud. Not because it was funny, because it was so arrogant, so sloppy, like they thought confidence could outrun reality forever. Diane said very carefully, "This is moving beyond family conflict." I knew what she meant. Forgery, fraud. That word sat in my stomach like ice. A month before the wedding, my father showed up at the farmhouse alone. I almost did not answer. He looked older than I had ever seen him. Not sad, worn down. I let him in. He stood in the kitchen with his hands in his pockets, staring at the floor. Finally, he said, "Your mother wants me to ask for peace." I almost laughed. Peace. Always, peace. Meaning surrender. I asked, "Do you?" He looked up. For a second, I thought maybe this was it. Maybe he was finally going to say something true. Instead, he said, "I want this to stop there." It was again. Not justice. Not honesty. Quiet. He wanted quiet. I asked if he knew about the fake statement. He said nothing for too long. My chest tightened. Then he said, "I knew they were upset." That was not an answer. I asked again. He sat down heavily and whispered, "I told your mother to let it go." So yes, he knew enough. Maybe not every detail enough. I felt something inside me settle. Not peace. The end of confusion, I said, "Then you can leave too." He looked stunned. Maybe because I had never spoken that plainly to him before. At the door, he turned and said, "Families survive by forgiving." I said, "Some families survive by choosing one person to absorb everything." He had no answer. He left. I locked the door behind him and cried harder than I expected, not because I regretted it, because I had waited my whole life for him to be braver than comfort. He wasn't. 2 weeks later, the police interviewed Jenna, then my mother. I do not know every detail. I know my mother called me 11 times that day. I did not answer. Jenna left a voicemail full of static and rage. At one point she hissed, "You think you're so smart, but you're ruining all of us." All of us, interesting phrase, not herself, not me, all of us. The next morning, my aunt called and said my mother was telling people I had gone nuclear. Maybe I had, but not first. Never first. The wedding was 10 days away when the final crack appeared. Kara sent me screenshots from a private group chat Jenna had with friends. One of the friends had leaked them after Jenna called her useless in a text fight. In those messages, Jenna bragged openly about messaging Daniel, about trying the farmhouse lock, about creating the neighborhood post. And then the line that made me sit down on the kitchen floor. Once Rose died, it was obvious Elise would get most of it. Mom said if we pushed hard enough, she'd split it just to keep the peace. Mom said, there it was, not misunderstanding, not grief. A plan. Keep the peace my whole life in 3 words. Push until Elise pays to make the room comfortable again. I stared at the screenshots until my vision blurred. Then I sent them to Diane and the detective. Kara looked at me and said, "Well, they're done." I wanted to believe that, but families like mine always save one last performance for the audience. Mine picked the wedding. We got married in the renovated storefront. Brick walls, warm lights, simple tables, no giant centerpieces, no fake grandeur, just the people who had earned the right to witness joy. The morning was calm. Too calm. Kara zipped my dress upstairs in the office while Daniel's sister fixed the hem. For 1 full hour I felt peaceful. Then Kara looked out the front window and said very carefully, "Elise, your family is here." My stomach dropped. Then she added, "And Jenna is wearing white." Of course she was. Of course I walked to the window and looked down. My mother stood in pale blue as if she had never heard a word I said in my life. Jenna stood beside her in a white satin dress. My dress, the one Rose paid to alter. My hands started shaking. Kara touched my shoulder and said, "You do not have to go down there," but I did. Not alone. Daniel came with me. So did Diane, who by then felt less like a lawyer and more like a battle-tested aunt. At the entrance, my mother was arguing with the coordinator. Jenna was filming on her phone. When she saw me, she switched on tears instantly. "That speed still amazes me," she said loudly. "I just wanted to make things right before your big day." A stage. Always a stage. My mother stepped forward and said, "Please don't do this in front of everyone." "Do what?" "Exist honestly." I said, "You were not invited." Jenna cried harder. Then she delivered the line she had clearly rehearsed. "I know you hate me, but I can't lose my sister, too." Guests had started to gather near the front. I could feel eyes on me. Old panic rose. The old instinct said, "Keep it quiet. Make it small. Do not embarrass the family." Then I looked at Daniel, then Kara, then Diane. Then I looked through the doorway at the room Rose would have loved and the life I had built from the pieces they kept trying to take. And something inside me clicked into place. Not rage, clarity. I said, loud enough for the entrance and half the room to hear, "You stole my wedding dress. Tried to steal Rose's estate. Filed false reports, forged documents, harassed my fiancé, and built a campaign to call me greedy because you thought I'd split everything to buy." Silence. Leave. Silence. Real silence. Jenna's tears stopped for half a second. My mother went white. Then she recovered and said, "How dare you make accusations like that here?" Diane stepped forward before I could answer. She said, calm as winter, "She dares because there is evidence." That changed the room. Jenna lowered her phone a little. My mother looked around and realized the audience was not automatically hers. Then Jenna did what she always did when cornered. She attacked. She pointed at me and shouted, "You always thought you were better than us. Rose pitied you because no one else could stand you." Old pain hit first, then something stronger rose behind it. Not shame, not this time. Truth, I said. Rose trusted me because I showed up. You showed up for paper. A sound moved through the guests behind me. Not quite a gasp, more like understanding. Then, in full panic, Jenna made the biggest mistake of her life. She shouted, "If you'd just split it, none of this would have happened." There it was, public, clean, unhidden, a confession shaped like a complaint. I watched the realization move across faces around us. My mother's mouth fell open for 1 second. Miles looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him. Then another voice cut through the room. My father, he had arrived late and heard enough. He stepped inside and said, "Stop." Not soft, not tired. Sharp. Everybody froze. He looked at Jenna and said, louder, "Stop lying. Stop blaming her. Stop all of it." I forgot to breathe. He turned to my mother and said, "You taught her this, and I let it happen." I had never heard him speak that honestly in my life. My mother looked furious and frightened all at once. She said, "This is not the place." He said, "No, this is exactly the place. Because you used every other one?" Then he faced me in front of everybody and said, "I'm sorry, just that. No excuse, no speech, no softener." I did not forgive him in that second. Life is not that neat, but I believed him, and that mattered. The coordinator opened the door wide and said, "They need to leave now." 2 of Daniel's cousins stepped forward too, not threatening, just solid present. My mother grabbed Jenna's arm. This time Jenna let herself be pulled. At the door she turned back and said, "This isn't over." And for the first time in my life, I smiled at her without fear. I said, "Yes, it is." She left. They all did. The entrance stayed quiet for one long beat. Then Kara clapped once and said, "Okay, great. Let's get married." Everybody laughed, real laughter. The kind that releases tension instead of hiding it. I laughed too, though tears were running down my face. Then I married Daniel in the storefront. Rose trusted me to keep standing. It was the happiest day of my life, not because it was perfect, because it was true. After the wedding, things moved fast. The fake statement, false reports, attempted break-in, harassment, screenshots, and public outbursts stopped looking like family drama and started looking like what they were. Fraud, harassment, unlawful entry attempts. I am keeping those parts simple. What matters is that records matter. Texts matter. Screenshots matter. Voicemails matter. Truth likes paperwork. My mother somehow stayed out of the worst consequences through careful denials and a very expensive lawyer. Jenna did not. Actions look ugly in black and white, especially your own words. The gossip turned the way gossip always does when facts finally arrive. People who had quietly believed the worst about me suddenly had kind things to say. I did not need them to. That was new too. Not needing the late rescue, my father started therapy. Again, I am not writing a fairy tale. He did not become brave overnight, but he started telling the truth in smaller rooms. Once, months later, while helping me repaint the back office, he said, "I spent years thinking quiet made me decent. I think it just made me useful to the loudest person in the room." I said, "Yeah." We stood there with paint on our hands and let that be. Enough. My mother still tells her version to anyone willing to listen. In her version, she was caught between 2 difficult daughters. In her version, she tried her best. Maybe she believes that. People can believe almost anything if it protects the reflection they need. I stopped trying to correct every lie. That job had eaten enough of my life already. I only correct what touches my work, my marriage, or my peace. Everything else can drift. The storefront opened that fall. We turned it into a studio event space and small cafe in the front corner. We called it Rose House. On opening morning, I unlocked the door before sunrise and stood alone in the dark for 1 minute. The air smelled like paint, coffee, and possibility. My hands shook a little when I switched on the lights, not from fear, from awe. People came. Then more people came. Then the line reached the sidewalk. Kara cried into a muffin. Daniel burned the first tray of pastries and pretended he had done it on purpose. My father arrived at noon carrying a small lavender plant. He held it out and said, "She always kept one by the porch." I took it. We looked at the plant instead of each other. Then I said, "Thanks, Dad. That was enough." Sometimes healing is not a speech. Sometimes it is a plant, a doorway, and two people trying not to waste a second chance. A year has passed now. I'm writing this upstairs while the afternoon crowd hums below me. There is flour on my sleeve. There is coffee on my desk. There is a framed photo near the window of Daniel, and me smiling in a way my younger self would not recognize. Every now and then, someone asks if I regret exposing everything so publicly at the wedding. No, I regret that it became necessary. I regret the years before it, when I confused endurance with love and silence with maturity. I regret every time I made myself smaller so other people could stay comfortable. But I do not regret the truth. The truth cost me a role. It gave me a life. That trade was worth it. The strangest part is this. For years, my mother acted like I was hard to love because I noticed too much. Jenna acted like I was dramatic because I remembered accurately. My father acted like I was difficult because I would not help bury everything forever. But the problem was never that I saw too much. The problem was that they needed me not to speak. And once I did, the whole machine broke. The last clear thing Rose ever said to me was in the hospital 2 days before she died. I had adjusted her blanket and was trying not to cry because she looked tired. She squeezed my hand and whispered, "You do not have to disappear to be loved." I did not understand it fully then. I do now. Belonging that has to be purchased with silence is not belonging. Love that only arrives when you're useful is not love. Family that survives by feeding on one person's self-erasure is not family. So no, I did not lose my family at my wedding. I lost a job. I lost the role of person who absorbed everything so everyone else could keep pretending. And in the space where that role used to be, I built a marriage, a business, and a life that finally feels like mine. Turns out Rose was right. The reward for showing up is not that unfair people become fair. It is that one day, if you keep choosing truth, you stop needing unfair people to explain your worth. And for the first time in my life, I did not feel difficult. I felt seen.